Have you ever noticed how the most successful people in any field seem to possess a strange ability to start over? How masters of their craft willingly abandon techniques that once brought them glory. How the greatest minds periodically dismantle everything they know and rebuild from scratch. Today, we're going to explore one of the most counterintuitive truths about achievement: that the path to mastery isn't about accumulating knowledge, it's about knowing what to discard. We're diving deep into the revolutionary concept that forgetting can be more powerful than remembering, that emptying your cup creates more space than filling it, and that unlearning might be the most advanced skill you'll ever develop. This isn't just theory. This is about transformation. This is about you breaking free from the invisible chains of your own expertise and discovering capabilities you never knew existed. Are you ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Paradox of Expertise. Picture this scene. It's 1997, and one of the world's most successful companies is about to make a decision that will nearly destroy them. Kodak, the photography giant that literally invented digital photography, is sitting on revolutionary technology. They have the patent, they have the expertise, they have everything they need to dominate the digital revolution. So what do? They file the technology away and continue pouring resources into film. Why? Because they were experts. They knew the film business inside and out. They had decades of experience, proven systems, and expertise that generated billions in revenue. Their cup was full, completely full. And because it was full, there was no room for the digital future that was about to reshape their entire industry. By 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. Meanwhile, companies that embraced digital photography, companies that were willing to unlearn what they knew about cameras and reimagine the entire concept of capturing images, became worth billions. Instagram, founded in 2010 with no history in traditional photography, sold to Facebook for $1 billion just 2 years later with only 13 employees. This is the paradox of expertise. The very thing that makes you successful can become the thing that limits your growth. Your expertise becomes a prison with golden bars, comfortable yet confining. You become so good at what you do that you stop questioning whether there might be better ways to do it. Think about your own life for a moment. What are you an expert at? What do you know so well that you could do it in your sleep? Now here's the uncomfortable question. When was the last time you questioned whether your expertise might be holding you back? Research from the University of California has revealed something remarkable about expert performance. While experts generally outperform novices, they also make a specific type of error that beginners never make. It's called the Einstellung effect, a German word meaning setting or installation. Experts become so accustomed to solving problems in a certain way that they fail to see simpler, more elegant solutions that beginners spot immediately. Chess grandmasters fall into this trap. Studies have shown that experienced chess players will sometimes miss obvious winning moves because their expertise guides them toward more complex strategies they've used successfully in the past. The beginner, unburdened by years of learned patterns, sees the simple checkmate that the master overlooks. But here's where it gets fascinating. The greatest chess players in history, players like Garry Kasparov, are famous not for sticking to what they know, but for periodically reinventing their style. Kasparov would deliberately study games from weaker players, forcing himself to see the board through fresh eyes. He understood that mastery requires unlearning just as much as it requires learning. This principle extends far beyond chess. In medicine, researchers have found that doctors with 10 to 20 years of experience sometimes have worse patient outcomes than newer doctors. Why? Because medical knowledge evolves rapidly, but experienced doctors tend to rely on what worked in the past rather than staying current with new research. They stop being students and start being experts. and that transition can literally cost lives. The neuroscience behind this is profound. When you first learn a skill, your brain is highly active, forming new neural connections and exploring multiple pathways to accomplish the task. But as you practice and become proficient, your brain actually reduces the number of neural pathways it uses. It finds the most efficient route and automates it. This is wonderful for performance, but terrible for adaptation. Your expertise becomes encoded in your brain as procedural memory, the same type of memory that lets you ride a bike without thinking about balance. Procedural memories are incredibly stable and resistant to change. They're supposed to be. They allow you to perform complex tasks automatically, freeing up your conscious mind for other things. But this stability comes with a cost. When circumstances change, when new technologies emerge, when better methods are discovered, your procedural memories fight against the new information. Your brain literally resists unlearning what it has worked so hard to automate. Consider the story of renowned guitarist Jimi Hendrix. When Hendrix was developing his revolutionary style, he had to unlearn traditional guitar techniques. He was left-handed, but learned to play on a right-handed guitar strung upside down. This forced him to develop completely unorthodox fingering patterns and chord shapes. What seemed like a limitation became his greatest asset, allowing him to create sounds and techniques that conventional players couldn't replicate. Hendrix didn't just learn new techniques on top of old ones. He fundamentally rewired his approach to the instrument. He proved that mastery sometimes requires breaking the rules you spent years learning to follow. Or think about sports. Every few years, a new technique emerges that revolutionizes an entire athletic discipline. The Fosbury flop transformed high jumping. The underhand free throw has been proven statistically superior in basketball, yet almost no professional adopts it because it looks unconventional. The willingness to look foolish, to unlearn the proper technique, to start over with something that feels wrong, separates the innovators from those who plateau. Here's what makes this particularly challenging for high achievers. The people who are most likely to need unlearning are the ones least likely to attempt it. If you've invested 10,000 hours into mastering a skill, the thought of discarding parts of that expertise feels like wasting your investment. Economists call this the sunk cost fallacy. But in the realm of personal expertise, it's more than just a financial calculation. It's an identity issue. You've built your self-concept around being good at something. You've received recognition, respect, and rewards for your expertise. Your expertise has become who you are. Unlearning threatens that identity. It asks you to become a beginner again, to experience the discomfort of incompetence, to face the possibility that your hard-won knowledge might be obsolete. Yet every master who has ever achieved true excellence has gone through this process. They've had to murder their darlings, to use a phrase from writing. They've had to take their most cherished techniques, the ones that first brought them success, and set them aside to make room for something new. This is the first truth about unlearning. It's not about forgetting. It's about making space. Your mind isn't unlimited. Your time isn't infinite. Your capacity to hold competing mental models simultaneously is constrained. To learn something new, especially something that contradicts what you already know, you must first create space by releasing your grip on old patterns. The martial artist Bruce Lee captured this perfectly when he said, "It's not the daily increase but daily decrease. Hack away at the unessential." Lee spent years mastering traditional martial arts, then spent even more years unlearning the rigid forms and styles to create his own philosophy of combat. He understood that addition isn't always progress. Sometimes the path forward requires subtraction. So, here's your first challenge. Before we go any further, I want you to identify one area of your life where your expertise might be limiting you. It doesn't have to be professional. Maybe it's the way you've always approached relationships. Maybe it's your financial strategies. Maybe it's your health routine or your creative process. Don't judge yourself. Don't defend your methods. Just notice. Notice where you automatically fall into familiar patterns. Notice where you stop exploring because you already know the answer. Notice where your cup might be too full to receive anything new. Because transformation begins not with learning something new, but with recognizing what old knowledge might need to be questioned. And that's where our journey truly begins. Chapter 2. The Neuroscience of Letting Go. Your brain is both your greatest ally and your most formidable opponent in the unlearning process. To understand why unlearning is so difficult, and more importantly, how to make it easier, we need to explore what's actually happening inside your head when you try to change established patterns. Let's start with a fundamental truth. Your brain is not designed for unlearning. Evolution optimized your brain for efficiency, not flexibility. Once you've found a solution that works, your brain really wants to keep using it. This makes perfect sense from a survival perspective. If you've successfully learned which berries are poisonous and which are safe, you don't want your brain randomly deciding to reconsider that information. But we no longer live in the environment our brains evolved to handle. The modern world changes faster than our ancestors could have imagined. What worked 5 years ago might be obsolete today. The cognitive systems that kept us alive on the savannah now sometimes keep us stuck in outdated patterns. Here's what happens in your brain when you learn something new. When you first attempt a task, whether it's playing an instrument, speaking a language, or using new software, a broad network of brain regions activates. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for conscious decision-making, works overtime. You're aware of every step. You're focused. You're thinking. As you practice, something fascinating happens. The activity in your prefrontal cortex decreases. The task gets handed off to other brain regions, particularly the basal ganglia and cerebellum, which handle automatic processes. Neural pathways that were initially weak get strengthened through a process called myelination, where the connections between neurons get wrapped in a fatty substance that makes signals travel faster. This is learning. The task moves from conscious effort to unconscious competence. You go from thinking about every finger position on the piano to just playing. From constructing every sentence in a foreign language to conversing naturally. From following a recipe step by step to cooking intuitively. This is also the problem. Once a skill becomes proceduralized, once it's handled by the automatic parts of your brain, it becomes very difficult to modify. Researchers at the University of California, Santa Barbara developed a detailed computational model of how procedural learning works in the striatum, the part of your brain crucial for habit formation. Their research revealed something important. Truly unlearning a proceduralized skill requires different mechanisms than learning it in the first place. Think of it like this. Learning is like carving a path through a forest. The more you walk that path, the more defined it becomes. Eventually, it becomes the obvious route, the path of least resistance. Your brain will automatically take you down that familiar trail without conscious thought. Unlearning isn't simply about stopping using that path. Even if you consciously decide to take a different route, your brain retains the memory of the old path. In moments of stress or distraction, you'll find yourself automatically heading down that familiar trail again. The old neural pathway doesn't disappear. It remains, ready to activate whenever your conscious control relaxes. This is why people who quit smoking often relapse years later during times of high stress. The neural pathways associated with smoking remain dormant but intact. This is why athletes who learn a bad technique early in their training struggle with it throughout their careers, even after thousands of hours of correct practice. The old pattern lurks beneath the surface, ready to emerge. So how do you actually unlearn? How do you weaken those old neural pathways while building new ones? The answer lies in neuroplasticity. your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Neuroplasticity was once thought to be limited to childhood, but research over the past few decades has revealed that adult brains remain remarkably plastic throughout life. The key is knowing how to activate that plasticity. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, has identified several critical factors that promote neuroplasticity in adults. The first is focused attention. When you're trying to learn something new, especially something that contradicts an old pattern, you need to engage your full conscious awareness. Passive exposure isn't enough. You must actively work at the edge of your ability, making mistakes and correcting them. But here's what many people miss. The actual neuroplastic changes don't happen during the focused work. They happen during rest, particularly during sleep. When you sleep, your brain replays the patterns you practiced during the day, strengthening new connections and, crucially, weakening old ones. Deep sleep is when your brain decides what to keep and what to discard. This has profound implications for unlearning. If you want to weaken old patterns and establish new ones, you can't just practice the new way. You need adequate sleep after that practice. Studies have shown that people who get quality sleep after learning a new skill can improve their performance by 20 to 30%, even without additional practice. That improvement isn't just about strengthening the new skill. It's also about weakening the interference from old patterns. Another crucial factor is novelty. Your brain releases specific neurochemicals when you encounter something genuinely new or unexpected. One of these chemicals is dopamine, which doesn't just make you feel good. It also tags experiences as important and worthy of neural restructuring. When you combine focused effort with genuine novelty, you create optimal conditions for neuroplasticity. This is why traveling to a new place can make you feel mentally sharper. Why learning a completely different skill can improve your performance in your primary domain. Why reading outside your field can spark creative insights. The novelty triggers neurochemical changes that make your entire brain more plastic, more ready to form new connections and release old ones. But perhaps the most important insight from neuroscience is that unlearning requires conscious interference with automatic processes. Remember how learned skills move to automatic brain regions? To unlearn them, you must deliberately bring them back into conscious awareness. Let's say you've learned to type with poor form that's causing hand pain. Your typing is automatic now. You don't think about individual keystrokes. To relearn proper form, you can't just try to type differently while maintaining your current speed. You must slow down dramatically, bringing the process back into conscious awareness. Feeling each keystroke deliberately. Only then can you begin to rewire the pattern. This principle applies to everything. If you want to change how you respond to criticism, you must first become consciously aware of your automatic response pattern. If you want to unlearn a limiting belief, you must first catch yourself in the moment when that belief activates. If you want to change your public speaking style, you must become aware of the automatic patterns you currently use. Awareness is the bridge between automatic processes and intentional change. Research on meditation provides powerful evidence for this. Experienced meditators show remarkable neuroplasticity. Brain scans reveal that meditation practice actually changes the physical structure of the brain, increasing gray matter density in areas associated with learning and memory, while decreasing it in areas associated with stress and anxiety. But meditation isn't about learning something new in the traditional sense. It's about becoming aware of automatic processes, observing your thoughts and reactions without being controlled by them. This metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking, is perhaps the most crucial skill for unlearning. It allows you to step back from your automatic patterns and see them as patterns rather than as reality. You realize that your current approach is one possible way of doing things, not the only way. Here's a practical framework for applying these insights. First, identify the specific pattern you want to unlearn. Be precise. Don't just say, "I want to be more open-minded." Say, "I want to unlearn my automatic tendency to immediately critique new ideas before considering them." Second, catch yourself in the act. Your pattern is automatic, so it activates before you're aware of it, but you can train yourself to notice it quickly. What triggers the pattern? What does it feel like in your body? What thoughts immediately precede it? Create awareness of the pattern in action. Third, introduce deliberate interference. When you catch the pattern activating, pause. Even a 2-second pause can disrupt an automatic process. In that pause, you create space for a different response. You might not know what that different response should be yet. That's okay. The pause itself is valuable because it prevents the old pattern from completing its loop. Fourth, practice the new pattern slowly and consciously. Remember, you're trying to carve a new path through the forest. It won't feel natural at first. It will feel awkward and require effort. That's perfect. That conscious effort is what activates the neuroplastic mechanisms. Practice the new pattern with full attention, ideally at times when you're fresh and focused, not stressed or tired. Fifth, consolidate with rest. After focused practice, give your brain what it needs to restructure. Get quality sleep. Take breaks. Don't try to force continuous practice. The restructuring happens during rest, not during effort. Sixth, introduce strategic novelty. Don't just practice the new pattern in identical situations. Vary the context. If you're unlearning a tennis swing, practice on different courts, at different times of day, with different partners. This prevents the new pattern from being too narrowly associated with specific cues and makes it more robust. Seventh, expect interference and don't judge it. The old pattern will resurface, especially under stress. This doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're encountering the reality of how brains work. When the old pattern emerges, simply notice it, acknowledge it, and return to the new pattern without self-criticism. Each time you do this, you're strengthening the new pathway and weakening the old one. Research shows that it takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days to form a new habit, with an average of 66 days. But unlearning is more complex than simply forming a new habit because you're not starting with a blank slate. You're competing against an established pattern. Be patient with yourself. Genuine neural restructuring takes time. Let me share a personal example to make this concrete. A friend of mine is a software developer who learned programming in the 1990s. His coding style, while functional, reflected the limitations and best practices of that era. When modern development practices emerged, emphasizing different patterns and approaches, he initially resisted. His old style worked. Why change? But he started noticing that newer developers were producing cleaner code more quickly. He decided to unlearn his old patterns. The process was humbling. He had to slow down his coding dramatically, thinking consciously about decisions he'd automated decades ago. He paired with junior developers, asking them to critique his work. He deliberately practiced in unfamiliar programming languages to prevent falling back on automatic patterns. For months, his productivity decreased. His ego took a beating as he made mistakes that felt elementary. But he stuck with it. He focused on awareness, caught himself reverting to old patterns, and patiently redirected himself to new approaches. He ensured he got good sleep, understanding that was when the real learning happened. A year later, his coding style had transformed. He wasn't just using modern practices, he'd internalized them. They felt natural now. And more importantly, he developed the skill of unlearning itself. He was no longer threatened by new frameworks or approaches. He'd experienced the discomfort of unlearning and survived, even thrived. This brings us to perhaps the most important neurological insight about unlearning. Your brain's resistance to unlearning isn't a flaw, it's a feature. That resistance exists to protect valuable learning. The trick is to respect that resistance while gently, persistently working past it. You're not trying to erase your past learning. You're trying to add flexibility to your repertoire. You're expanding from having one way to having multiple ways, from being a specialist with a single tool to being someone who can select the right tool for each situation. The ultimate goal isn't to forget your expertise. It's to hold your expertise more lightly, to see it as one option among many, rather than as the only option. When you achieve this cognitive flexibility, you become dangerous in the best possible way. You combine the power of expertise with the adaptability of a beginner. And that combination, that synthesis of mastery and flexibility, is where true excellence lives. Chapter 3: The Beginner's Mind, Your Competitive Advantage. In Zen Buddhism, there's a concept called Shoshin, which translates to beginner's mind. The Zen master Shunryu Suzuki famously wrote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." This isn't just philosophical wisdom. It's a strategic advantage that separates those who plateau from those who continuously evolve. Let's explore how cultivating a beginner's mind can become your most powerful tool for growth. There's a famous Zen parable that perfectly illustrates this concept. A learned professor traveled far to visit a renowned Zen master, eager to learn about Zen philosophy. When the professor arrived, he immediately began talking about his extensive knowledge, his academic credentials, his understanding of various philosophical traditions. The Zen master listened patiently and then offered to serve tea. As the master poured tea into the professor's cup, the cup filled to the brim, but the master continued pouring. The tea overflowed onto the table, then onto the floor. The professor watched in confusion until he could no longer restrain himself. "The cup is full," he exclaimed. "No more will go in." The Zen master smiled and replied, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and knowledge. How can I teach you anything unless you first empty your cup?" This parable contains a profound truth that extends far beyond philosophy. When your cup is full, when you think you already know, you stop being teachable. You filter every new piece of information through your existing framework, accepting only what confirms what you already believe and rejecting anything that contradicts it. But when you approach situations with a beginner's mind, with your cup empty, you create space for genuine insight. You become curious rather than judgmental. You ask questions rather than making statements. You observe rather than assume. Let me tell you about a CEO I worked with who embodied this principle. She ran a successful manufacturing company that had been profitable for 15 years using the same business model. When a consultant suggested they explore automation and artificial intelligence, her initial reaction was dismissive. She knew manufacturing. She'd been doing it for 2 decades. She had expertise. But then she caught herself. She recognized that her expertise was making her defensive. She decided to adopt a beginner's mind. She told herself, "I know nothing about AI and manufacturing. I'm going to approach this with curiosity rather than judgment." She spent 3 months visiting other companies, talking to her youngest employees about technology, reading outside her industry. She asked questions that felt elementary. She admitted when she didn't understand something. She let go of the need to be the smartest person in the room. What she discovered transformed her business. Not only did automation make sense, but her entire mental model of what manufacturing could be expanded. She implemented changes that increased productivity by 40% while actually improving product quality and reducing environmental impact. But here's the key. She never would have been open to those changes if she'd maintained her expert identity, if she'd kept her cup full. The beginner's mind isn't about becoming ignorant or pretending you don't have expertise. It's about holding your expertise lightly, remaining curious, staying open to the possibility that there might be better ways you haven't discovered yet. It's about approaching each situation as if for the first time, even when you've encountered similar situations hundreds of times before. Research in cognitive psychology supports the value of this approach. Studies on problem solving show that when people are told they're experts, they actually perform worse on novel problems than when they're told they're beginners. Why? Because the expert identity triggers a need to quickly find solutions based on past patterns, while the beginner identity encourages exploration and creative thinking. This connects to the concept of cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt your thinking to new situations. People with high cognitive flexibility can switch between different mental frameworks depending on the context. They're not locked into a single way of viewing problems. They can see multiple perspectives and choose the most appropriate one for each situation. Beginner's mind cultivates cognitive flexibility. When you approach situations without preconceptions, you naturally consider more possibilities. You're not trying to force new information into old categories. You're allowing new categories to emerge. Think about children for a moment. Young children are learning machines. They absorb languages, master complex physical skills, understand social dynamics, all at a rate that seems miraculous to adults. How do they do it? They have beginner's minds. They don't have fixed ideas about what's possible or impossible. They don't have ego invested in being right. They're purely curious and playful in their exploration. As we age, we lose this quality, not because our brains become less capable, but because we accumulate opinions, judgments, and fixed ideas about how things work. We trade our curiosity for certainty, our wonder for knowing. We become so concerned with being right that we stop exploring what we might be wrong about. But here's the beautiful thing. You can reclaim beginner's mind at any age. It's not about becoming childish. It's about becoming childlike in your curiosity while maintaining adult wisdom and discernment. It's about combining the knowledge that comes from experience with the openness that comes from humility. Let me give you a practical exercise to cultivate beginner's mind. Choose an activity you do regularly, something you've done so many times that it's become automatic. It could be your morning routine, your commute to work, a task at your job, a conversation with your partner. Tomorrow, approach that activity as if you've never done it before. Notice everything. What do you usually overlook because it's so familiar? What assumptions do you make about how it has to be done? What would you do differently if you had no history with this activity? You might be surprised by what you discover. You might find that you've been making things harder than necessary because you've never questioned your approach. You might notice details you've ignored for years. You might recognize opportunities you've been blind to because of your familiarity. This is the power of beginner's mind. It makes the familiar strange again. It reveals the invisible assumptions that constrain your thinking. It creates space for innovation and improvement that expertise alone cannot provide. Consider how this applies to relationships. When you first meet someone, you're curious about them. You ask questions. You listen carefully. You're fascinated by their perspectives and experiences. But over time, as you get to know them, you start to think you understand them completely. You stop being curious. You assume you know what they'll say, how they'll react, what they think and feel. This is when relationships stagnate. When you lose beginner's mind with someone, you stop discovering them. You relate to your memory of who they were rather than who they are now. Everyone changes continuously. The person you've known for 10 years is not exactly the same person you met a decade ago. But if you're not maintaining beginner's mind, you miss those changes. What would happen if you approached someone you've known for years with genuine curiosity? If you asked questions you've never asked? If you listened to their answers without filtering them through your accumulated assumptions about who they are, you might rediscover them. You might find that your relationship deepens in unexpected ways. You might realize that your expertise about them was actually limiting your ability to truly know them. The same principle applies to your work. You might be an expert in your field, but are you approaching each day, each project, each challenge with fresh eyes? Or are you relying on patterns that worked in the past, assuming they'll work in the future? Here's a sobering truth. Expertise without beginner's mind leads to obsolescence. The world changes too quickly now for any expertise to remain valid indefinitely without updating. The skills that made you valuable 5 years ago might not be the skills that keep you valuable 5 years from now. But if you maintain beginner's mind, if you stay curious and open, you can continuously evolve. You can see emerging trends before others do, because you're not filtering them through the lens of what used to work. You can adapt to change quickly, because you're not rigidly attached to old methods. Think about the most innovative companies in the world. What do they have in common? They institutionalize beginner's mind. Google famously allows employees to spend 20% of their time on projects unrelated to their main work. Why? Because exploring unfamiliar territory cultivates the mental flexibility and creativity that drives innovation. Amazon has a principle they call "leaders are right a lot." But if you read the full description of this principle, it's not about being stubborn or trusting your gut. It's about seeking diverse perspectives, being willing to disconfirm beliefs, and learning from unexpected sources. It's about holding your expertise lightly and staying open to better ideas. These companies understand that in a rapidly changing world, yesterday's expertise can become today's liability unless balanced with beginner's mind. They've built cultures that encourage questioning, experimentation, and learning from failure. They reward intellectual humility as much as intellectual achievement. You can do the same in your personal life. You can create structures and habits that cultivate beginner's mind. Here are some practical strategies. First, regularly put yourself in situations where you're a genuine beginner. Take a class in something completely outside your area of expertise. Learn a musical instrument if you're an engineer. Study physics if you're an artist. Travel to places where you don't speak the language. The discomfort of being a beginner reminds you what it feels like and builds your tolerance for not knowing. Second, practice asking more questions and making fewer statements. In conversations, especially about topics where you have expertise, challenge yourself to ask 3 questions before offering your opinion. Listen to understand rather than listening to respond. Get curious about perspectives that differ from yours. Third, seek out people who disagree with you, not to argue, but to understand. What do they see that you don't? What might they know that you're missing? Approach these conversations with genuine curiosity, rather than a need to convince or be proven right. Fourth, regularly examine and challenge your own assumptions. Write down the core beliefs you hold about your work, your relationships, your capabilities. Then ask yourself, what would I need to believe for the opposite to be true? You don't have to abandon your beliefs, but the exercise of considering alternatives strengthens your cognitive flexibility. Fifth, embrace not knowing. When you don't know something, say so. When you're wrong about something, admit it quickly and learn from it. Build a reputation not for always being right, but for being genuinely interested in finding truth even when it contradicts your previous positions. Sixth, play more. Adults forget how to play. We turn everything into work, into achievement, into something that must be optimized. But play, genuine purposeless play, cultivates beginner's mind. It allows you to explore without attachment to outcomes. It lets you experiment without fear of failure. Seventh, practice mindfulness or meditation. These practices train you to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them. You start to see your mental patterns as patterns rather than as reality. This creates the distance necessary for beginner's mind to emerge. The greatest paradox of beginner's mind is that it doesn't diminish your expertise, it amplifies it. When you hold your knowledge lightly, when you remain open and curious, your expertise becomes more nuanced, more flexible, more powerful. You move from having a hammer and seeing everything as a nail to having a full toolkit and the wisdom to choose the right tool for each situation. Steve Jobs captured this beautifully when he said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." He wasn't advocating for ignorance, he was advocating for maintaining the hunger to learn and the humility to admit what you don't know, even at the highest levels of achievement. This is the secret that masters know and that struggling experts miss. True mastery includes the wisdom to remain a perpetual student. The more you genuinely learn, the more you realize how much more there is to learn. The curve of knowledge isn't a straight line upward. It's a deepening awareness of complexity and possibility. When you adopt beginner's mind, you transform every experience into a learning opportunity. A conversation becomes a chance to understand a different perspective. A failure becomes data about what doesn't work. A success becomes an opportunity to examine what factors contributed to it. You're no longer trying to prove how much you know. You're continuously exploring what you might learn. And here's the beautiful irony. This makes you more valuable, not less. In a world of know-it-alls, someone who genuinely listens, learns, and adapts stands out. In a market of rigid thinkers, cognitive flexibility becomes a competitive advantage. In an era of rapid change, the ability to unlearn and relearn becomes more valuable than any specific knowledge you possess. So, empty your cup. Approach today's challenges with fresh eyes. Ask questions you've never asked. Consider possibilities you've previously dismissed. Be willing to discover that you were wrong about something important, because that willingness, that openness, that humility is the foundation of continuous growth. Your expertise is valuable, but your capacity to remain a student is priceless. Hold both and watch what becomes possible. Chapter 4: Creative Destruction in Your Personal Life. The economist Joseph Schumpeter coined the term creative destruction to describe how innovation drives economic progress. Old industries die to make room for new ones. Obsolete technologies get replaced by superior alternatives. The process is painful for those invested in the old ways, but it's essential for advancement. But creative destruction isn't just an economic principle, it's a personal development strategy. And understanding how to apply it in your own life can accelerate your growth more than almost any other practice. Let me start with a question that might make you uncomfortable. What parts of your identity need to die for you to become who you're capable of being? We tend to think of personal growth as addition. We want to add new skills, new knowledge, new capabilities. But this overlooks the fact that we have finite time, energy, and attention. Every hour you spend maintaining an old skill is an hour you can't spend developing a new one. Every mental model you cling to is cognitive space unavailable for better frameworks. True transformation often requires subtraction, not addition. It requires letting go of things that once served you, but now limit you. It requires the courage to obsolete your own expertise before external forces do it for you. Think about Nokia, once the dominant mobile phone company. In 2007, they controlled 40% of the global mobile phone market. They had expertise in manufacturing, distribution, and mobile technology. But when Apple introduced the iPhone, Nokia faced a choice: protect their existing business model or embrace a radically different vision of what a phone could be. They chose protection. They dismissed touchscreen phones as a fad. They invested in defending their declining market share rather than reimagining their future. By 2013, Microsoft acquired Nokia's phone business for a fraction of its former value. And by 2016, the Nokia brand had essentially exited the phone market. Meanwhile, Apple, which had zero experience in the phone industry, revolutionized it by being willing to obsolete their own iPod before someone else did. They practiced creative destruction on themselves, cannibalizing a successful product to create something better. This same principle applies to your personal development. You must be willing to obsolete your own expertise, to creatively destroy your current capabilities to make room for superior ones. I know a professional photographer who built a thriving business over 15 years, specializing in film photography. His darkroom skills were impeccable. His understanding of film stocks and development processes was encyclopedic. He took pride in his craft and his expertise. When digital photography began dominating the market, he resisted. He saw digital as inferior, lacking the depth and character of film. He was right about the technical limitations of early digital cameras, but he was wrong about the trajectory of the technology. For several years, he held on, serving a shrinking niche of film enthusiasts. His income declined. His relevance in the photography world diminished. He was experiencing creative destruction imposed from outside, and it was painful. Finally, a friend challenged him with a pointed question. Would you rather be a master of a dying art or a student of a growing one? That question shifted something. He realized he'd been defining himself by his mastery of film rather than by his love of photography. He'd confused the tool with the craft. His identity had become attached to a specific technology rather than to the fundamental art of creating powerful images. He made a decision. He sold most of his film equipment. He took his ego to the basement and enrolled in digital photography courses where he was older and less knowledgeable than most other students. He asked for critiques from photographers who were younger and less experienced in film, but more skilled in digital. It was humbling, frustrating, occasionally humiliating, but within 2 years, he'd transformed his practice. He combined his deep understanding of light, composition, and visual storytelling with new digital capabilities. His work became more powerful, not despite the transition, but because of it. He didn't lose his expertise. He translated it into a new medium. More importantly, he learned how to learn again. He proved to himself that he could reinvent his craft. That skill, the meta skill of creative destruction and reinvention, became more valuable than any specific technical knowledge he possessed. This is the essence of creative destruction in personal development. You deliberately obsolete your current capabilities to make room for superior ones. You don't wait for external forces to impose change on you. You impose it on yourself, on your own terms, before circumstances force it upon you. But let's be clear about what creative destruction is not. It's not reckless abandonment of everything you've learned. It's not destroying for the sake of destruction. It's strategic selection. It's choosing what to keep and what to release based on where you want to go, not where you've been. Think of it like pruning a tree. A skilled gardener doesn't randomly cut branches. They selectively remove branches that are dead, diseased, or growing in directions that inhibit the tree's optimal development. The pruning might look destructive in the moment, but it creates space for more vigorous, productive growth. You need to prune your life with the same intentionality. What beliefs are you carrying that no longer serve you? What habits consume time without creating value? What skills have become obsolete in your field, but you continue maintaining out of habit or sentimental attachment? What relationships drain your energy without contributing to your growth? What professional identities limit the roles you can imagine for yourself? These are hard questions. They require honest self-assessment. They demand that you distinguish between what you are and what you've been. They ask you to value your future potential over your past achievements. Let me share a framework for applying creative destruction to your personal development. It's a 5-phase process that I've seen work repeatedly for people willing to engage with it honestly. Phase 1 is audit. Take inventory of where your time, energy, and attention currently go. Track it for a week without judgment. How many hours do you spend on different activities? What mental energy goes to various concerns? What skills are you actively maintaining? Then ask, if you were starting from scratch today, would you choose to invest in these same areas? Or are you maintaining them purely because you've already invested so much? Be brutally honest. Sunk costs are not a reason to continue investing. Phase 2 is and evaluate. For each major investment of your resources, ask whether it's still aligned with where you want to go. Not where you've been, but where you want to go. The past doesn't vote. Just because something was the right choice 5 years ago doesn't mean it's the right choice now. Consider 3 categories: keep, evolve, or eliminate. Keep means it's still valuable and aligned with your goals. Evolve means it has potential, but needs significant transformation. Eliminate means it's time to let it go entirely. Phase 3 is decide. This is where courage comes in. Based on your evaluation, make decisions about what to obsolete. This isn't easy. You're choosing to let parts of your current identity die. You're accepting that skills you worked hard to develop might need to be released. You're admitting that past investments might not pay future dividends. Write down your decisions. Be specific. I'm going to stop defining myself as someone who, or I'm going to phase out my focus on, or I'm ready to let go of my attachment to. Phase 4 is action. This is where most people fail. They audit, evaluate, and even decide, but they never actually implement. Creative destruction requires action. You must actually stop doing things, not just intend to stop. If you've decided to eliminate a skill that's no longer valuable, don't just stop practicing it. Actively dismantle the infrastructure around it. Cancel the relevant subscriptions. Give away or sell the equipment. Tell people in your network that you're no longer doing this work. Make it difficult to fall back into old patterns. If you're evolving something, create specific milestones for the transformation. What will be different 6 months from now? What new capabilities will you have developed? What old patterns will you have replaced? Phase 5 is reflect. Every quarter, review your creative destruction decisions. What worked? What didn't? What's the impact been on your growth, your energy, your results? Creative destruction is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing practice. Markets change. You change. Your goals evolve. Regularly reassess what needs to be kept, evolved, or eliminated. Now, let's talk about the emotional dimension of creative destruction, because this is where most people get stuck. Letting go of expertise, of identity, of investments you've made, triggers grief. Yes, actual grief. You're experiencing loss, even if what you're losing is something you've chosen to release. Honor that grief. Don't dismiss it or pretend it doesn't exist. When you let go of a professional identity you've held for years, you're mourning a version of yourself. When you stop investing in a skill you once mastered, you're acknowledging that time has passed and circumstances have changed. That's legitimately sad. But grief and growth can coexist. In fact, they often must. The unwillingness to grieve what we're losing is one of the main reasons people resist necessary change. They think if they hold on tight enough, if they refuse to let go, they won't have to experience the loss. But creative destruction will happen one way or another. Industries will change, technologies will evolve, markets will shift. The question isn't whether change will occur. It's whether you'll be an active agent in that change or a passive victim of it. When you choose creative destruction, when you impose it on yourself strategically, you maintain agency. You're not having change done to you. You're choosing your path forward. That agency makes all the difference in how you experience the transition. Think about athletes at the end of their careers. The ones who struggle most are those who cling desperately to their identity as active players, unable to envision a future beyond their playing days. They resist retirement until they're forced out and the transition is traumatic. But athletes who embrace creative destruction while they're still playing, who start developing new identities and capabilities before they have to, transition much more successfully. They choose when and how to evolve rather than having evolution forced upon them by injury or declining performance. You can apply this wisdom to every domain of your life. Don't wait until you're forced to change. Don't let external circumstances impose creative destruction on you. Be proactive. Look ahead. Identify what's likely to become obsolete and start the transition process before it's urgent. This is how you stay relevant in a rapidly changing world. Not by clinging harder to what you know, but by continuously evolving what you know. Not by defending your current expertise more vigorously, but by developing new expertise while your current expertise still has value. Here's a practical exercise. Write a letter to yourself from 5 years in the future. In this letter, your future self describes what you had to let go of to become who you are now. What beliefs did you release? What skills did you stop investing in? What identities did you outgrow? This exercise can reveal what creative destruction your growth might require. It helps you see your current attachments from a future perspective. It allows you to begin the emotional process of letting go before you're forced to. Remember, creative destruction isn't about destroying your value. It's about concentrating your value. It's about taking your finite resources, your limited time and energy, and investing them where they'll create the most impact. It's about clearing out the obsolete to make room for the essential. The companies that thrive over decades are those that continuously reinvent themselves. IBM went from hardware to services. Amazon went from books to everything. Apple went from computers to consumer electronics to services. Each transformation required letting go of old identities and embracing new ones. You can do the same. In fact, in today's world, you must. The average career length is decreasing. The skills that are valuable change more rapidly than ever. The knowledge you have today will be obsolete faster than at any point in history. But if you embrace creative destruction as a practice, if you make it part of your regular rhythm rather than a crisis response, you become anti-fragile. You don't just survive change, you thrive because of it. You become someone who gets better through disruption rather than someone who gets broken by it. So take an honest look at your life. What needs to be creatively destroyed? What are you holding on to out of fear or ego rather than because it serves your growth? What version of yourself needs to die so a better version can emerge? The answers might be uncomfortable. That's okay. Discomfort is the price of growth, and the cost of avoiding that discomfort is stagnation, obsolescence, and regret. Choose growth. Choose creative destruction. Choose to be the architect of your own evolution rather than a victim of inevitable change. Your future self will thank you for the courage to let go of who you were to become who you're capable of being. Chapter 5. The Growth Mindset Revolution. In the early 2000s, psychologist Carol Dweck made a discovery that would transform how we understand achievement. She found that people fall into two categories when it comes to their beliefs about abilities: those with fixed mindsets and those with growth mindsets. People with fixed mindsets believe that intelligence, talent, and abilities are static traits. You either have them or you don't. Success is about proving how smart or talented you are. Failure is proof of inadequacy. Effort is seen as evidence of lack of natural ability. People with growth mindsets believe that abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Intelligence can be grown. Talents can be cultivated. Success is about learning and improving. Failure is information about what isn't working yet. Effort is the path to mastery. This might seem like a simple difference in perspective, but the implications are profound. Dweck's research showed that students with growth mindsets consistently outperformed those with fixed mindsets, even when they started with similar abilities. They were more resilient, more persistent, and more willing to take on challenges. But here's what makes this revolutionary. Mindsets can change. You're not born with a fixed or growth mindset. You develop one based on your experiences, particularly the messages you received about ability and effort. And because mindsets are learned, they can be unlearned and replaced. This is where unlearning becomes crucial. If you've developed a fixed mindset, perhaps because you were praised for being smart or talented, rather than for your effort, you need to unlearn that framework. You need to literally rewire how you think about your own capabilities. Let me tell you about a manager I coached who embodied a fixed mindset. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah was successful by conventional measures. She'd risen to a director-level position at a major corporation. She was known for being highly intelligent and analytically sharp. She'd been told since childhood that she was gifted. But Sarah had a problem. She avoided any situation where she might fail or look incompetent. She only took on projects she was confident she could excel at. She didn't share ideas until they were fully formed because she couldn't stand the thought of someone critiquing a half-baked concept. She was highly defensive when she received feedback, interpreting it as criticism of her fundamental abilities rather than as information for improvement. As a result, Sarah's growth had plateaued. She was excellent at what she already knew how to do, but she wasn't expanding her capabilities. She'd created an invisible ceiling for herself, built not by lack of ability, but by her beliefs about ability. When we first discussed growth mindset, Sarah's initial reaction was defensive. She thought I was implying she wasn't smart. This is typical of people with fixed mindsets. They interpret everything through the lens of proving or disproving their worth. But gradually, Sarah started to see how her mindset was limiting her. She recognized that her fear of failure was preventing her from attempting anything truly challenging or innovative. She realized that her defensive response to feedback was blocking her development. She understood that her belief that abilities were fixed had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The shift didn't happen overnight. Sarah had to actively unlearn decades of fixed mindset thinking. She started small, taking on projects that scared her a little. She practiced responding to feedback with curiosity rather than defensiveness. She began sharing work-in-progress ideas, getting comfortable with imperfection. She started viewing challenges as opportunities rather than threats. One powerful exercise that helped Sarah was reframing her self-talk. When she caught herself thinking, "I'm not good at this," she would add "yet" to the end of the sentence. "I'm not good at this yet." That one word, "yet," implies possibility. It suggests that current ability is not final destiny. Over time, Sarah's entire approach to work transformed. She became known not just for her intelligence, but for her willingness to tackle difficult problems and learn quickly. She started taking on roles that stretched her capabilities rather than only playing to her existing strengths. Her career accelerated because she'd unlearned the limiting belief that abilities are fixed. The research on growth mindset extends far beyond individual achievement. Organizations with growth mindset cultures outperform those with fixed mindset cultures. In fixed mindset organizations, People spend enormous energy proving they're smart and hiding mistakes. Politics thrives. Innovation suffers. People play it safe. In growth mindset organizations, people focus on learning and improvement. Mistakes are treated as data. Challenges are welcomed. People collaborate rather than compete because someone else's success doesn't threaten your own worth. Innovation flourishes because people are willing to experiment and risk failure. But here's what's crucial. You can't fake a growth mindset. You can't just tell yourself, "I believe abilities can be developed," while continuing to act from a fixed mindset. The shift has to be genuine, which means you have to actually unlearn the fixed mindset patterns at a deep level. Dweck herself has warned about what she calls false growth mindset. This is when people adopt the language of growth mindset, praising effort and persistence, but don't actually believe that abilities can fundamentally change. They say the right words, but their underlying beliefs remain fixed. True growth mindset requires confronting your actual beliefs about intelligence and ability. It requires noticing when you're in a fixed mindset mode, particularly under stress or after setbacks. It requires actively practicing growth mindset responses until they become natural. Here's a practical framework for unlearning fixed mindset and developing genuine growth mindset. First, develop awareness of your mindset triggers. In what situations do you revert to fixed mindset thinking? For many people, it's when they're being evaluated or compared to others. For others, it's when they're learning something new and struggling. For some, it's in specific domains where they have strong fixed beliefs about their abilities or lack thereof. Pay attention to your self-talk in these situations. Are you thinking things like, "I'm just not good at this type of thing," or "I don't have the talent for this"? Those are fixed mindset thoughts. They reflect a belief that abilities are innate and unchangeable. Second, challenge fixed mindset thoughts directly. When you catch yourself thinking in fixed terms, question that thought. Where did this belief come from? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Is it possible that you just haven't developed this ability yet, rather than that you're incapable of developing it? This isn't about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about examining the logical basis of your beliefs. Most fixed mindset beliefs don't hold up to scrutiny. They're usually based on limited experiences, often from childhood, that we've generalized into permanent verdicts about our capabilities. Third, reframe challenges and failures. Instead of seeing challenges as tests of your worth, see them as opportunities to develop new capabilities. Instead of interpreting failure as proof of inadequacy, interpret it as information about what approaches don't work. This reframing needs to be concrete, not just conceptual. When you face a challenge, literally say to yourself, "This is an opportunity to grow." When you fail at something, ask yourself, "What can I learn from this? And what will I try differently next time?" Fourth, focus on process, not just outcomes. Fixed mindsets are obsessed with outcomes because outcomes supposedly reveal your true ability. Growth mindsets focus on the process of improvement because the process is what develops ability. This means paying attention to the strategies you're using, the effort you're investing, the learning you're experiencing, not just whether you succeeded or failed. It means valuing progress over perfection. It means celebrating improvement even when you haven't reached the end goal yet. Fifth, embrace the power of yet. This simple word is transformative. Every statement of limitation becomes a statement of possibility when you add yet. I can't do this yet. I don't understand this yet. I haven't mastered this yet. Yet implies a growth trajectory. It assumes development over time. It removes the permanence from current limitations. Make yet a regular part of your vocabulary. Sixth, seek out challenges deliberately. Growth mindset isn't just about how you think about challenges that come your way. It's about actively seeking challenges because you understand that's how capabilities develop. Choose projects that scare you a little. Take classes in subjects you're not naturally good at. Put yourself in situations where you'll be a beginner. The discomfort of being challenged is evidence that you're growing, not evidence that you're inadequate. Seventh, view effort as positive. Fixed mindsets see effort as a bad sign. If you were truly talented, things would come easily. Growth mindsets see effort as the means by which talent is developed. The most accomplished people in any field are those who've invested enormous effort in deliberate practice, not those who rely on natural talent alone. Celebrate effort in yourself and others. Take pride in working hard at something, even if the results aren't immediately impressive. Recognize that effort is building capability that will pay off over time. Eighth, learn from criticism and feedback. Fixed mindsets are defensive about criticism because they interpret it as an attack on their fundamental worth. Growth mindsets welcome feedback because it provides information about how to improve. Practice responding to criticism with curiosity. Ask clarifying questions. Seek specific examples. Thank people for pointing out blind spots. This doesn't mean accepting all criticism as valid, but it means being open to the possibility that there's something useful to learn. Ninth, find inspiration in others' success rather than feeling threatened by it. Fixed mindsets experience others' success as proof of their own inadequacy. If someone else is succeeding, it must mean you're not good enough. Growth mindsets experience others' success as evidence of what's possible and as an opportunity to learn. When you see someone excel at something, study them. What can you learn from their approach? What strategies are they using? How did they develop their capabilities? Their success expands your sense of what's possible, not diminishes your worth. 10th, be patient with yourself. Unlearning a fixed mindset and developing a growth mindset is itself a process that requires time and effort. You'll slip back into fixed mindset thinking sometimes, especially under stress. That's normal. Don't interpret those slips as proof that you can't change your mindset. That would be fixed mindset. Thinking about your ability to develop a growth mindset. The research is clear. People who adopt growth mindsets achieve more, learn faster, and experience greater satisfaction. They're more resilient in the face of setbacks. They're more willing to take on ambitious goals. They build more authentic relationships because they're not trying to constantly prove their worth. They experience less anxiety because their self-worth isn't riding on every outcome. But beyond individual benefits, growth mindset has implications for how we structure our society. In education, growth mindset interventions have been shown to close achievement gaps. Students who learn that intelligence is malleable improve their grades and test scores, particularly students from disadvantaged backgrounds who often internalize fixed beliefs about their limitations. In business, companies that foster growth mindset cultures are more innovative and adaptable. They respond to market changes more quickly because people aren't rigidly attached to old ways of doing things. They attract and retain better talent because people want to work in environments where they can develop and grow. In relationships, growth mindset transforms how people interact. Instead of judging partners as either right for you or not, you work together to grow. Instead of seeing conflicts as proof of incompatibility, you see them as opportunities to improve how you relate to each other. The implications extend to every domain of human experience. How you think about aging, health, creativity, spiritual development, all are influenced by whether you approach them with a fixed or growth mindset. Perhaps most importantly, growth mindset is contagious. When you adopt it, you influence those around you. Children of parents with growth mindsets develop growth mindsets. Employees of leaders with growth mindsets adopt them. Students of teachers with growth mindsets embrace them. Your decision to unlearn fixed mindset and embrace growth mindset doesn't just change your own trajectory. It changes the trajectory of everyone you influence. So, where are you operating from a fixed mindset? Where have you decided that your current capabilities represent your permanent limitations? Where are you afraid to try because you might fail and what that failure might mean about you? Those areas are your opportunity. That's where unlearning fixed mindset and embracing growth mindset will have the greatest impact. That's where your potential lies dormant, waiting for the belief that will allow it to emerge. You're not done developing. You're not a finished product. Your capabilities today don't represent the ceiling of what you can achieve. Every expert was once a beginner. Every master started with no skill at all. The difference between those who achieve mastery and those who plateau isn't innate talent. It's mindset. Choose growth. Unlearn the limiting beliefs about fixed abilities. Embrace the truth that you can develop any capability you're willing to invest effort in developing. That choice, that shift in belief, might be the most consequential decision you ever make. Chapter 6, The Strategic Path Forward. We've covered a lot of ground in this journey through the landscape of unlearning. We've explored the paradox of expertise, the neuroscience of letting go, the power of beginner's mind, the necessity of creative destruction, and the revolution of growth mindset. Now it's time to integrate all of this into a practical, strategic approach that you can implement in your life starting today. The truth is, understanding these concepts intellectually is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you systematically apply them to your specific situation. So let's create a roadmap for making unlearning a core practice in your life, not just an interesting idea you once considered. First, let's talk about assessment. You can't unlearn what you haven't identified. You need to conduct a thorough audit of your current mental models, skills, and patterns. This isn't about judging yourself. It's about creating awareness. Start by writing down the core competencies and areas of expertise you've developed over your life. Include both professional and personal domains. What are you known for? What do people come to you for advice about? What can you do without much conscious effort because you've done it so many times? Now comes the critical question. Which of these competencies remain valuable for where you're going? And which have become maintenance costs without corresponding benefits? Which skills are appreciating assets that compound in value over time? And which are depreciating assets that become less relevant each year? Be honest. This is difficult because we have emotional attachments to our expertise. We've invested years developing these capabilities. We've built identities around them. Admitting that a skill might be obsolete feels like admitting we wasted time. But that's sunk cost fallacy thinking. The time is spent. The question is how you'll spend your future time. For each area of expertise, ask yourself, is this still relevant to the world as it exists today, not as it existed when I developed this skill? Does this align with where I want to be 5 years from now? Am I maintaining this skill out of genuine value or out of habit and identity? Could I get more leverage by developing a different capability? Is this expertise preventing me from being open to better approaches? Once you've completed this assessment, you'll likely have 3 categories: skills to maintain and deepen, skills to let atrophy naturally without active investment, and skills that need active unlearning because they're creating interference with new patterns you want to develop. The second category, natural atrophy, is important to understand. Not everything needs active unlearning. Some skills will simply fade as you stop using them, and that's fine. You don't need to actively unlearn how to use obsolete software you no longer use. You can just stop maintaining that knowledge. Active unlearning is for patterns that are so deeply ingrained that they automatically activate and interfere with new approaches. These are the proceduralized skills we discussed earlier, the ones that have moved to automatic processing in your brain. These require deliberate intervention to modify. Let's talk about creating an unlearning practice. This needs to be systematic, not sporadic. Here's a framework you can adapt to your situation. Weekly reflection. Set aside 30 minutes each week to examine your patterns. What automatic responses did you notice this week? Where did you catch yourself falling into familiar patterns, even when they weren't optimal? Where did you resist new information because it contradicted your existing beliefs? Keep a journal of these observations. Over time, you'll see patterns in your patterns. Monthly experiments. Each month, choose one area where you'll intentionally practice unlearning. Maybe you'll try a different approach to a familiar task. Maybe you'll seek out perspectives that contradict your own views. Maybe you'll learn a new skill that forces you to think differently about your expertise. The key is to make it concrete and time-bound. Quarterly reviews. Every 3 months, conduct a more comprehensive review. What have you unlearned? What new capabilities have emerged? What's still blocking your progress? What needs to change about your approach? Use this time to assess whether your unlearning practice is actually creating the growth you're seeking. Annual strategic planning. Once a year, do a deep assessment of your entire trajectory. Are you evolving in the direction you want to go? What major areas of expertise might need to be creatively destroyed to make room for your next phase of development? What identity shifts are necessary? This is your opportunity to make big strategic decisions about your path forward. But frameworks aren't enough. You need community. Unlearning is hard to do alone because your own blind spots are, by definition, blind to you. You need other people to help you see what you can't see yourself. Build an unlearning support structure. This might include a learning partner, someone who's also committed to continuous growth and unlearning. You meet regularly to share what you're working on, where you're stuck, what you're discovering. You challenge each other's assumptions and provide external perspective on blind spots. A mentor who's ahead of you, someone who's navigated similar transitions and can help you see around corners. A good mentor for unlearning isn't someone who just knows more than you. It's someone who's successfully unlearned significant patterns in their own development and can guide you through that process. A reverse mentor who's different from you. Someone younger, from a different field with different perspectives. They can help you see where your expertise has become calcified. They can challenge assumptions you don't even realize you're making. A community of practice. A group of people committed to continuous learning and unlearning. This might be formal, like a mastermind group, or informal, like a group of friends who share this value. The key is regular interaction with others who will support your growth while also challenging your comfortable patterns. Now let's talk about practical techniques for the unlearning process itself. The substitution technique. Don't just try to stop doing something. Replace it with a better alternative. If you're unlearning a communication pattern that's not working, identify specifically what you'll do instead. If you're unlearning a technical approach that's obsolete, learn the modern equivalent. The brain handles substitution much better than pure elimination. The slow motion practice. When you are trying to unlearn an automatic pattern, slow it down dramatically. Bring it into conscious awareness by performing it in ultra slow motion. This is how athletes modify technique, how musicians change fingering patterns, how anyone changes proceduralized skills. Slow it down until you can consciously control every element, then practice the new pattern slowly until it begins to automatize. The environmental redesign. Change your environment to make old patterns harder and new patterns easier. If you're unlearning a work habit, change your physical workspace. If you're unlearning a thinking pattern, change the information sources you expose yourself to. Environment shapes behavior more than we realize. Use that to your advantage. The identity narrative. Write new stories about who you are. Instead of, I'm a perfectionist, try, I'm someone who's learning to value progress over perfection. Instead of, I'm not good with technology, try, I'm developing my technological capabilities. The narratives we tell ourselves shape our reality. Consciously craft narratives that support your growth rather than reinforce your limitations. The pre-commitment strategy. Make future decisions in advance. If you know you tend to fall back into old patterns under stress, decide now how you'll respond to stress differently. If you know you resist feedback defensively, commit now to a specific response when you receive criticism. Pre-commitment reduces the cognitive load in the moment and makes new patterns more likely to activate. The celebration of failure. Actively celebrate instances where you tried something new and it didn't work. This might feel unnatural, but it's crucial for unlearning the fixed mindset association between failure and inadequacy. Each time you attempt something beyond your current capability, regardless of outcome, acknowledge the growth that attempt represents. Now, let's address a critical question. How do you maintain progress without burnout? Continuous unlearning and growth requires enormous energy. You can't sprint forever. You need a sustainable pace. Think of your development as occurring in cycles, not as a constant push. There are seasons for aggressive growth, where you're actively unlearning major patterns and developing new capabilities. These are intense periods that require significant energy and focus. There are also seasons for consolidation, where you're integrating what you've learned, letting new patterns stabilize, allowing your nervous system to adjust to your new normal. These are lower intensity periods that are just as important as the growth spurts. Honor both seasons. Push when it's time to push. Rest when it's time to rest. Sustainable transformation is rhythmic, not constant. Also, remember that unlearning has emotional components that need to be honored. You're not just changing behaviors or acquiring knowledge. You're often grieving old identities, facing fears about who you might become, managing anxiety about not knowing, processing the discomfort of incompetence. Give yourself permission to feel these emotions. They're not obstacles to overcome. They're part of the process. When you feel fear about letting go of expertise, acknowledge it. When you feel grief about an identity you're outgrowing, honor that loss. When you feel frustrated by your current incompetence in a new domain, recognize that frustration as evidence of growth. Emotional intelligence about the unlearning process makes the entire journey more sustainable and ultimately more successful. Let's talk about measuring progress. How do you know if your unlearning practice is working? Traditional metrics often don't apply because you're not just adding capabilities, you're transforming your entire approach. Here are some indicators of successful unlearning. Increased cognitive flexibility. You find it easier to consider multiple perspectives. You're less rigid in your thinking. You can hold contradictory ideas without immediately needing to resolve them. Greater resilience. Setbacks don't devastate you the way they once did. You recover faster. You're able to find the learning in failure without getting stuck in self-judgment. Reduced defensiveness. You receive feedback with more curiosity and less reactivity. You're genuinely interested in different viewpoints, rather than immediately arguing against them. More experiments. You're trying new approaches more frequently. You're willing to look foolish as a beginner. You're exploring outside your comfort zone regularly. Better questions. The questions you ask become more sophisticated. You're no longer just looking for answers that confirm what you already believe. You're asking questions that might reveal the limits of your current understanding. Accelerated learning. You pick up new skills faster because you're not fighting against old patterns as much. You've developed meta-learning capabilities. Greater ease. Paradoxically, as you engage in the challenging work of unlearning, life often feels easier. You're not spending as much energy maintaining obsolete expertise or defending outdated positions. You're flowing with change rather than resisting it. Expanded identity. You no longer define yourself so narrowly. You're comfortable being a novice in some areas while being experienced. In others, your sense of self is more flexible and adaptive. Track these indicators informally. Notice when they improve. Celebrate progress even when it feels subtle. Finally, let's talk about legacy. Why does all this matter beyond your personal development? When you commit to continuous unlearning and growth, you become a model for others. You show that transformation is possible at any age, any stage of career, any level of expertise. You demonstrate that expertise doesn't have to lead to rigidity, that mastery doesn't preclude openness. This matters because we live in a time of unprecedented change. The skills that are valuable today might be obsolete tomorrow. The business models that work now might fail next year. The approaches that solved yesterday's problems might not address tomorrow's challenges. The individuals, organizations, and societies that will thrive are those that can unlearn and relearn rapidly. Those that can hold their expertise lightly while remaining committed to continuous evolution. Those that can be both confident and humble, both skilled and curious. By developing your own capacity for unlearning, you contribute to building this capability in the broader culture. You influence others through your example. You create permission for people around you to question, to change, to grow. This is how transformation scales. Not through top-down mandates about how people should think or what they should do, but through individuals who embody a different way of being and inspire others through their example. So as we close this chapter, I want to return to where we began. The path to mastery isn't about accumulating knowledge. It's about knowing what to discard. It's about emptying your cup to make room for new tea. It's about letting go of who you were to become who you're capable of being. This isn't easy work. It goes against some of our deepest instincts about holding on, about proving ourselves, about maintaining our hard-won expertise. But it's the work that separates those who continuously evolve from those who plateau and eventually decline. You have a choice. You can cling to your current expertise, defend your current approaches, maintain your current identity, and gradually become obsolete. Or you can embrace unlearning as a practice, make it part of your regular rhythm, and discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. The world needs what you'll become, not just what you've been. Your greatest contributions likely lie ahead of you, not behind you. But reaching them requires letting go of what brought you this far so you can grasp what will take you further. Are you ready? Are you willing to empty your cup? Are you prepared to trade certainty for possibility, comfort for growth, knowing for learning? If so, then you're ready for the most exciting phase of your development. You're ready to discover that unlearning isn't about diminishing yourself. It's about expanding into your full potential. It's about becoming not just competent but adaptable. Not just skilled, but wise. Not just expert, but masterful in the truest sense of the word. The journey continues. The destination isn't a fixed point of arrival. It's a continuous process of becoming. And that process, that commitment to lifelong growth through deliberate unlearning, is the real mastery we're all seeking. Now go. Take what you've learned here. Apply it to your life. Start small if you need to, but start. Empty your cup. Question your expertise. Embrace beginner's mind. Practice creative destruction. Cultivate growth mindset. And watch as your life transforms in ways you couldn't have imagined when your cup was full. The future belongs to the learners, the unlearners, and the relearners. And you're now equipped to be all three. We've reached the end of our journey together, but your personal journey is just beginning. Everything you've learned today is valuable, but only if you act on it. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. So let me leave you with some specific steps you can take right now to begin your unlearning practice. First, choose one specific area where you're going to practice unlearning this week. Don't try to transform everything at once. Pick one pattern, one belief, one automatic response that you recognize isn't serving you anymore. Write it down. Be specific about what you're going to do differently. Second, find someone to share your commitment with. Tell them what you're working on unlearning and why it matters to you. Ask them to check in with you about your progress. Accountability transforms good intentions into actual change. Third, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future content that will support your growth journey. Every video on this channel is designed to help you become the person you're capable of being. Let's stay connected on this path. Fourth, leave a comment below sharing your biggest insight from today's audiobook. What resonated most powerfully with you? What are you going to do differently because of what you learned? When you articulate your insights, you deepen your learning and inspire others who are on similar journeys. Fifth, if you found value in this audiobook, hit that like button and share it with someone who's stuck in their expertise, someone who might benefit from the message of unlearning. Growth is contagious. When you share transformational content, you're contributing to a culture of continuous learning and development. Remember, mastery isn't a destination. It's a practice. It's the daily choice to remain curious, to stay open, to keep learning and unlearning and relearning. It's the courage to let go of who you were to become who you're capable of being. You now have the frameworks, the science, the strategies. You know about the paradox of expertise, the neuroscience of letting go, the power of beginner's mind, the necessity of creative destruction, and the revolution of growth mindset. You have everything you need to start transforming your relationship with learning and expertise. The question is, will you? Will you empty your cup? Will you embrace the discomfort of being a beginner again? Will you have the courage to creatively destroy your own expertise before someone else does it for you? I believe you will, because you've made it to the end of this audiobook, which means you're serious about growth. You're not someone who plateaus and accepts mediocrity. You're someone who continuously evolves, who stays hungry and curious, who understands that the greatest version of yourself is always one more unlearning away. So go out there and make space for mastery. Let go of what no longer serves you. Question your expertise. Maintain beginner's mind. Choose growth over comfort, learning over knowing, possibility over certainty. The future you're capable of creating is extraordinary, but it requires letting go of the past that brought you here. That's the price of transformation, and it's absolutely worth paying. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I'm excited to see what you become as you embrace the power of unlearning. Remember, your next level of success won't come from adding more to what you know. It will come from releasing what's holding you back. Now go create that future, and I'll see you in the next video.